Most people wouldn't notice the odd space between the baseboard and the floor vent in the dining room. It was less than half an inch, just enough to swallow a coin or the edge of a photo, nothing more. But Daniel McAllister wasn't most people. On his first night in the old house, while helping Eleanor rearrange her late father's furniture, he felt it, a subtle shift beneath his heel like the floorboards had sighed. He paused, listened, nothing. And yet, something about the way the air moved near that corner tugged at the edge of his thoughts, like a forgotten memory trying to claw its way back. He knelt, tapped twice on the wood, hollow. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Daniel said nothing. He just smiled faintly and retrieved his pocket knife. What makes a person hold on to something they don't understand? Why does a single sound in an old house, a faint draft behind a wall, send the heart racing like it remembers something we don't? Maybe it's because part of us, the quietest, most ancient part, still believes the past isn't really gone. It's waiting, hiding, listening. We don't just inherit houses or heirlooms, we inherit silence. And sometimes, that silence is hiding a secret no one was meant to find. The house had belonged to Eleanor's father, Richard Callahan, a history professor, widower, and the kind of man who wore silence like a second skin. When he passed, the property was left to Eleanor with a simple note attached to the will. Be careful what you open. She'd laughed it off at first, but after 2 weeks inside those walls, she'd begun to sense something. Not a haunting, exactly, but an echo. The way shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far at night. The way her own reflection sometimes felt a beat too slow in the hallway mirror. Daniel had only been visiting for a few days. A longtime friend from college, recently divorced, he'd offered to help her pack the house up before selling it. But as they sifted through her father's belongings, they kept stumbling across things that didn't quite belong. Letters addressed to no one, books with margins filled in, a woman's delicate script, photographs of places Eleanor had never been to, and yet felt strangely familiar. One afternoon they discovered a locked drawer in her father's study. Inside, a faded journal bound in a cracked leather. Eleanor recognized the handwriting immediately. Not her father's, but her mother's. Patricia Callahan had died when Eleanor was 12. There were barely any belongings of hers left in the house. No photos, no clothes, not even a perfume bottle. And now, here was this, a journal, untouched for decades. The entries were fragmented. Many of the pages had been torn out, but one phrase kept repeating again and again, scrawled in red ink like a warning. The girl in the frame isn't me. Don't believe the smile. Eleanor stared at the sentence for a long time, her fingers numb. Daniel leaned over her shoulder, reading quietly. Do you think she meant you? I don't know, she whispered, but I think this house does. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She wandered the hallway barefoot, the wood creaking under her steps like it was whispering with every move. When she passed the dining room, something made her stop. The floor vent, the one Daniel had noticed before. She dropped to her knees and pressed her hand against the wooden panel beside it. A cold breath of air seeped out, and then she heard it. 3 knocks, from inside the wall. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just froze. Daniel found her still kneeling there minutes later, her hand trembling on the wall, her face pale. I heard it, she said softly. There's something behind it. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and a screwdriver. Together, they pried open the panel. Dust exploded into the air. Behind the wall was a small, flat space, and inside it, wrapped in a silk cloth the color of dried blood, was a wooden frame. Not just any frame. It was the exact one Eleanor had dreamt of the night before. And inside it was a photograph of her, or someone who looked just like her, standing alone on a wooden pier, staring straight into the lens, smiling. But the eyes were wrong. They were hers, but colder, hollow. Eleanor didn't remember ever posing for a photo like this. She didn't remember that dress, that place, that moment. And yet she knew, in some unspoken way, that this picture had been waiting for her, waiting for years. I think my mother left this for me, she whispered. Daniel looked at the frame again. On the back, there was something scratched into the wood, a date, April 9th, 1967. Daniel stared at her. You weren't even born then, she nodded. I know. And just like that, the questions began to unravel faster than either of them could answer. A strange draft swept across Daniel's ankles the moment he pressed his palm against the cracked plaster. It was faint, like the breath of someone holding back a whisper. Eleanor noticed it too, the way the wallpaper fluttered near the edge, as though the wall itself were exhaling. Daniel met her eyes, and neither of them said anything at first. They didn't need to. Something was there. He grabbed the edge of the torn wallpaper and gently peeled it back. Decades of dust filled the air, and behind the wall, perfectly centered in a space no one had touched in years, was a wooden frame. Eleanor stepped closer, her hand involuntarily reaching out before pulling back. The frame was coated in a dull gray film, almost like ash, and there was something haunting in the way it sat, not crooked or hastily hidden, but placed, intentionally, reverently, as if someone had left it there for a reason they hoped no one would ever discover. Daniel pulled it out slowly, both of them holding their breath, as if a single sound might shatter the room. The picture inside was old, black and white, slightly faded, but unmistakable. It was Eleanor, or someone who looked exactly like her, standing on a pier, alone, staring directly into the lens. She wore a dress Eleanor had never seen before, and her hair was curled in a way she hadn't worn since her 20s. But it wasn't her. She was sure of it. "I don't remember this," she murmured, her voice shaky. Daniel turned the frame over, looking for a date, a signature, anything. There was a note tucked behind the backing. It was yellowed and delicate. Daniel unfolded it slowly and read aloud. "If you're seeing this, you've already come too far, but you always did. You never knew when to stop." Eleanor's knees buckled slightly, and she reached for the wall. "That's my mother's handwriting." Daniel looked at her sharply. "Are you sure?" She nodded, staring at the photograph, her mind racing back to places she thought she'd sealed off. "She died when I was 12, but I remember her handwriting. She used to leave notes for me under my pillow. This is hers." The photograph, the note, the sealed wall, none of it made sense. Daniel laid the picture on the floor and noticed something else, a symbol carved into the frame's edge, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. It was a circle intersected by a cross, with a single dot in the center. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Eleanor stared at it for a long time. "No, but I think we need to find out." They stayed up through the night, searching every inch of the house, going through boxes of Eleanor's mother's belongings that had sat untouched in the attic for years. Dust clung to every edge. Spiderwebs lined the corners. And yet, buried beneath an old jewelry box, Eleanor found it, the same symbol etched onto a folded letter. She opened it slowly. It was dated April 9th, 1967. "I fear she knows too much. The girl watches everything. If anything happens to me, keep this hidden. If she ever finds it, it means it's already begun." There was no signature, but the handwriting, once again, was unmistakable. Eleanor looked at Daniel, her hands trembling. What did she think I would begin? They sat in silence, the weight of generations pressing in from all sides. Outside, a storm had begun to brew, the kind that made the air feel electric, the kind that made old houses creak as though they remembered something. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph was more than just a warning. It was a message, or a puzzle, maybe even a trap. That night, Eleanor dreamed of the pier. The sky was a dull gray, the water still. She stood barefoot on the wooden boards, wind blowing through her dress, staring at something in the distance. And then she heard it, a voice calling her name, faint, desperate. She turned slowly, but no one was there, just the frame lying at her feet, empty. She woke up gasping. Daniel was already awake, staring out the window. "Someone was outside," he said. "Just for a second. I saw a shadow. Then it was gone." "Do you think they want the picture?" Eleanor asked. "I think they want what's behind it." They didn't speak again for a long while. Over the next few days, Eleanor became obsessed with the image. She scanned every inch of it, enlarged it, flipped it, held it under UV light, even took it to an old friend of hers, a retired photo technician named Marlene, who owed her a favor. Marlene stared at the photo for nearly 10 minutes in silence. Then, without a word, went into the back of her workshop and returned with a small black light scanner. She passed it across the surface of the image, and slowly, a second image began to emerge beneath the first. "What the hell?" Eleanor whispered. Beneath the photo of the woman on the pier was another scene, a cabin in the woods, barely visible, but definitely there. The structure was small, with a chimney on one side and a crooked wooden door. There was something about it that looked wrong, almost like it wasn't built, but forced into the landscape, as if the earth had tried to swallow it and failed. Marlene looked disturbed. "Whatever this is, Ellie, it was hidden for a reason. It's called image stacking, really rare. Used in intelligence circles back in the Cold War. The real picture is the one underneath." "Where is that cabin?" Daniel asked. And that's how it began. The drive, the coordinates, the feeling that they were following a path someone had set long before they were ever born. The road was long and wound through forgotten parts of Maine, towns where no one answered the doors, signs too rusted to read. They found the cabin near the edge of a lake, surrounded by trees, so dense the sunlight barely touched the ground. It looked just like the hidden image. Eleanor felt her heart tighten. "This place, I've seen it before." Daniel touched her shoulder. "In your dream?" She nodded. They entered the cabin slowly. Dust covered everything. The air smelled like mildew and something faintly metallic. In the center of the room was a single chair facing a mirror. The mirror was cracked, and in its reflection, Eleanor didn't see herself. She saw her mother, smiling, behind them. She turned around, but the room was empty. Daniel didn't say a word. He had gone pale, eyes fixed on the reflection. "She was here," he said. "I saw her too." They found a box under the floorboards, sealed with wax. Eleanor broke it open with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of letters, all written in the same delicate script, her mother's. Some were dated years before Eleanor was even born, some decades after she'd supposedly died. Each letter began the same way. "To my daughter, if you're reading this, then time has begun to fold." Daniel read through them silently, piecing together the story. A story of women in their family who had seen things they couldn't explain, who had experienced fractures in time, dreams that bled into reality, people who appeared before they were born, warnings that arrived too late. It wasn't a curse, it wasn't madness, it was a cycle, one that Eleanor was about to complete. The final letter was addressed directly to her. "Eleanor, I tried to protect you, but I see now it was never my place. You are the mirror, and it's time to remember who you are." Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees swayed violently, and the lake seemed to rise. Daniel gripped her hand tightly. "You're not alone in this." But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was looking at the mirror, and her reflection was no longer her own. It was younger, different, and smiling. The woman in the reflection lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, and so did Eleanor, perfectly in sync. They stared at each other, one inside the mirror, one outside, until the wind stopped and the silence returned. Eleanor stepped back from the mirror as if her own reflection had burned her. The version of herself inside the glass no longer smiled. It watched, patiently, like it was waiting for her to remember something, something that had never been spoken, but had always been known. Daniel stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, but Eleanor didn't feel it. Her mind was adrift, stuck somewhere between memory and vision. The letters, the dreams, her mother's warnings. All the pieces had been scattered across time, and now they were clicking into place like a puzzle she didn't realize she'd been solving her entire life. "I think I've been here before," she said softly. Daniel looked around the old cabin, the broken mirror, the layers of dust. "In your dream?" "No," she whispered, "before I was born." The words surprised her even as she said them, but the moment they left her lips, she knew they were true. From the corner of the room, a faint creaking sound echoed, like footsteps on old wood. Daniel turned instinctively but saw nothing. "It's starting again," Eleanor said, "like my mother said. The folding. They had stayed too long. The air had shifted. The silence now felt aware. Daniel took Eleanor's hand and started for the door, but when he reached for the knob, the wood beneath their feet groaned louder, deeper, as if the house itself was reluctant to let them go. Outside, the forest had changed. The lake was still there, but the trees looked older, taller. The path they had used to arrive was gone. They hadn't stepped into the past. The past had come to them. Daniel scanned the surroundings. That hill, was it always there? No, Eleanor said, and neither was that light. From behind the hill a dim glow pulsed, soft like candlelight, but shifting in rhythm. Drawn to it, Eleanor moved forward before Daniel could stop her. At the top of the hill, they saw it, a clearing with a small stone well at the center. On the edge of the well sat a box, identical to the one they'd found beneath her father's floorboards. This one wasn't sealed with wax, but open, waiting. Eleanor approached, hands trembling. Inside the box was another letter, addressed in her mother's handwriting. "This is your last door. If you open it, you'll understand everything, but once it's open, you can't unsee what comes next." Daniel read over her shoulder, then looked at her. "You don't have to." "Yes," she said, "I do." Beneath the letter was a small brass key and a folded piece of parchment. The map was hand-drawn, a crude outline of the forest, the cabin, and a marked spot labeled only with one word, home. Eleanor's breath caught. "She left me a way back," Daniel nodded, gripping her hand tighter. "Then let's go find it." They walked in silence, the trees watching them, the wind almost whispering. After what felt like hours, or minutes, they couldn't tell anymore, they reached a clearing marked by 3 oak trees in a perfect triangle. In the center, a rusted doorframe with no walls, standing impossibly upright in the middle of the grass. No hinges, no handle, just space inside a frame. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. The mirror. It's not just a reflection, it's a passage. Daniel looked hesitant. "If you walk through, what happens to the you on the other side?" She turned to him, eyes steady. "Maybe I become her, or maybe I was always her." He hesitated, but then said, "Then let's do it together." She shook her head. "No, this is mine. It's always been mine." Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but the way Eleanor stood, calm, resolved, told him it was already decided. She kissed his cheek. "Thank you for helping me remember." And then, without another word, she stepped through the doorframe. The world shifted. There was no light, no color, just a memory. She was standing on the pier, the same one from the photograph. The water below was perfectly still. A voice called her name. "Eleanor." She turned. Her mother stood there, younger than Eleanor remembered, beautiful, sad. "You found it," she said. Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice failed. Her mother stepped forward, brushing her hand along Eleanor's cheek. "I didn't leave to protect you from the past," she said softly. "I left to protect you from what you would become." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "What am I?" Her mother smiled faintly. "You're the last echo, and now the sound fades." Eleanor blinked, and everything vanished. She woke up in her father's house. Same room, same couch. The dining room was quiet. No broken wall, no hidden frame. Daniel wasn't there. Neither was the journal, or the mirror. She stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, everything looked normal, peaceful, real. But when she looked in the hallway mirror, her reflection paused before turning with her, and smiled. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notification. Enjoy, and comment below about your experience listening to this story.